hello everyone, and well, let me get these wires out of the way so you guys can see me better. Yeah. Hello everybody, welcome to a Massachusetts Central radio show, or Camo's Automotive Radio Show, Camo's Log, or Camo's Log Corner. I've been known, or just Camo's Log back in the day. CL, Camo's Log, CL. But we are known as the Camo's Automotive Radio Show. It's not very much of a radio show because I don't have any cars on here just yet, not yet. So I will actually. I'm going to upload a video of me watching a Corvette. Actually do that. So I will actually put out stuff like that. There's a lot of cool cars coming out now that the weather's starting to get warmer. So hello everybody. I thought I'd introduce you guys to the Turbo and its significance at Indianapolis. From my knowledge, turbos didn't start getting used at Indianapolis till I believe post-war. Most roadsters were either midgets or something that had a big displacement engine. It wasn't until post-war, till the 1949-50, that the cars started to get their, people started to experience with supercharging and turbocharging, because most sprint cars back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s were usually big displacement, Offenhauser engines. Usually you were either, if you were in a midget, it was usually a 4-cylinder. And then you graduated to the 4-cylinder, 2.6 liter Offenhauser, and then I think in the late 50s, early 60s, it started to gain turbos. There was also the Navi engine, which was a supercharged V8, and I don't believe there were any diesels at diesels there. And I believe that the engines in the world, I believe that in the 50s, I think it was like from 1951 to like 1957, 1958, that you could bring a Formula One engine over. So you could bring either a 6-cylinder, a V12, or one of the big displacement V12s to power the car, because back then the World Championship wasn't reduced to a certain capacity limit. I think the capacity limit back in the 50s, I think, was either 2.5 or 2.9 liters, can't remember. And some cars were supercharged at 1.5, or some cars were supercharged at 0.75, at 7,500 cc's. But some Formula One cars were supercharged back then. Not a heck of a lot of them. Because the fuel consumption, especially in the 60s, in the late 60s, was there. But in Indy, turbocharging really didn't become a thing till like 64. Turbocharging didn't really take off until like 67, 68, 69. The reason why I say 65, 66, 67, 68, 69 is because Lotus would interfere with that with their big Ford DFE based V8s, producing 4.2 liters, and then eventually that was a stock block rule that they had back then, and they had stock block rule, and I was talking about stock block rules back in the Indy engines and the history of the Speedway. So that whole stock block turbocharged Mercedes-Benz cheater motor that they had back then, that they had in 1994, wasn't the first stock block, and it wasn't the first stock block engine to win. It was, I don't know why the modern commentators say, "Oh, a stock block engine has never won the Indy 500." Well, the 4.2 was technically a stock block, because I think at that time they had an engine capacity for turbo engines 2.6 liters or 2.65 liters or 2.61 or 2.65. I believe it was. I believe the limit was 2.65, but I believe Offenhauser, Ford, and Voigt all had 2.61, 2.65, 2.63, some weird ones. And Gurney would come along with a 315, 318, or 320 cubic inch engine just for a low cost option and stuff like that. But for teams that wanted to go fast, wanted to go up the front, go 150, 160, 170, 180 miles an hour, were wanted to go there. They wanted to do that. For those of you guys, I don't think too many Indy cars were supercharged. The Navi was supercharged, and it made a great noise. If you guys go on YouTube, look up the Navi engine and look up the noise that engine made. It's a great noise. Ford's 2.65 liter, based on the Cosworth, Ford based 2.65. It wasn't the Cosworth. It was based off the Cosworth DFE, but it really wasn't, because the Cosworth was 3 liters. That wouldn't be till the Cosworth DFX in the late 70s, because in 76, 77, 78, 79, Cosworth would come 76, 77, 78, 79. That's when Cosworth would start to become the engine to be. That's the reason why a lot of people sit there and go, there's the reason why in the mid-2000s, everybody's like, Honda is the only engine. They don't have Chevy or Ford or they don't have Chevy, Ford, or Toyota in there anymore. There used to be a time when all cars used to be Cosworth. Used to be in the 60s and late 70s, early 80s, where the cars all used to be Cosworth for that stretch of time. I think it was between 1975, 76, 77 into 1987, 89, when Cosworth was when Ilmore came up with the Chevy Ilmore Indy V8, the 265A. The DFX would be the standard. You just needed to have either a March, a Lola, or Penske chassis to put it in. And the Cosworth engine proved to be a very lucrative thing for not only Ford, but also Cosworth over in England. That's when turbocharging, a lot of people think, oh, turbocharging, it's sort of so it started in the 70s. The cars done by Foyt, Gurney, and Gurney's Eagles, Foyt's Coyotes were putting out 1,000 to 12,000 horsepower back then. This was an attempt to get to the 200 mile an hour limit. It was only, I think, until 1975, before Cosworth started to kind of take over the de facto engine back in the late 70s, that those cars started to do it. Now, when Cosworth came out, they wanted a reliable unit, and they also wanted a cost-effective unit, because the units that Foyt and Gurney were using were specially made. I mean, Foyt even had Foyt's V8 was practically a 2.61 or 2.65 liter Ford V8 with 2 turbo strap to it. And AJ, as you guys know, drove cars, and he was a big sassy burly, big Tex, as we call him in the IndyCar world. Big boy. When men were men, when men ruled the world of motorsport. Well, when St. James also was also there. So, but it was kind of when the tough guys could race, and it was also when women could play as well, because Lynn St. James competed in so many Indy 500s. It's not unreal. She's actually played with the boys, so I give that to her. I always give it my hat to the women in the world that can play and go toe to toe with the boys. So in the late 70s, turbocharging started to become a thing. It was around turbocharging in not Formula One, in IndyCar would be dominant from the early 50s, late 60s, up until like 1996, 97-ish. 97 on, when you were at Indy, it was all normally aspirated 4-liter V8s, and then eventually we got to the high winding European-based or Japanese-based V8s with Chevy, Honda, and Toyota. And then eventually in the 90s, the Ford Cosworth XB, the XA, the XB, and the XA, XB, and XD and then Cosworth, Ilmor, and then Ilmor's A, B, C, D engines. A lot of people know that the D engine was used in the Penske cars in '94 when they dominated the championship, and Penske would actually use the Ilmor engines and the Cosworth engines to make his engines. And in fact, he still uses Chevy engines to this day. He's always been with Chevy. I think he has a deal with Ilmor, with the new Ilmor, not the Ilmor we know, not the Ilmor that's owned by Mercedes-Benz, but an American Ilmor. So yeah, so they, yeah, so after 94, 95, 95, 96, when the split happened, Tony George wanted overhead cam V8s to come back. He didn't want this double overhead cam high revving crap that would happen. Unfortunately, that would not go the way. Fortunately, they needed reliability, and the Chevy Ilmor engine was no longer going to be produced, and the engines were getting too expensive. Jump ahead to 2012 when Dan Weldon died, and he started testing the DW12. We know it as the IR18 today because the IR18, and it's probably the fastest form of the DW12. Because I remember when the DW12, the Dan Weldon 12 started, cars could only go 227, 228 when they first started. A lot of people were like, oh, this is gonna be boring. The cars are hitting 241 miles an hour in a straight line now these days at Indy with the boost up, and I think the pole lap today was, I think the pole time today was, the first day of qualifying runs was 2:33.5. I have a sneaking suspicion we're gonna get 2:34s tomorrow when they go for the Fast Six and stuff like that. But the cars do not make the same power. Back in the 1970s, cars could run all the boost they wanted. Then I think in the late 70s, early 80s, because they didn't want the power outputs spiraling up to like 1,000 or 12,000 or 1,500 horsepower, especially with Penske in the field. They didn't want him dominating all the time, of course. They ended up limiting the boost pressure to 445 pounds per square foot or square inch. If you get 45 pounds boost. And today, I think they make less than that. In today's world, they make 1.6 bar back then, and 55 inches would be 1.8 bar. Now 55 inches was for the stock block Buicks and Maynard engines and Penske stock block Mercedes that dominated the field. There was kind of the Mercedes stock block. For those of you who just sit there and say that's a loophole, I just want to say this: stop saying it's a loophole. Penske read the rule book and he followed the letter of the law. It's just it didn't get outlawed, it didn't get banned. It just got politically killed, and I don't know why people think that the word loophole is a great thing. There's no loophole in the rules. It's just flat up simple engineering. The reason why people say, oh, it's a loophole, he built the engine the way he was supposed to, the way it was meant to be, and he just ended up using it. He just ended up having a lot of money, and I believe IndyCar was like, nope, we can't have this. The cars will be too fast, and we'll top speeds, because people were predicting with the Mercedes engine by 96, the lap times would have been like 240. The lap times would have probably been about 240, probably about 240, 243, which Might have not been good for what Tony George was trying to do. Again, he was the one who instigated the split, um, and stuff like that. But I just wanted to say this: that motor is not a cheater. It was they followed the letter of the law. They didn't do anything stupid to it. They just they just read the rule book and they just did what they could do with the rules with what they had. There was no cheating. There was no illegal bargaining agreements. They just Penske just flat up engine. Penske just knew how to engineer a motor and how to engineer a car, and that was it. There's no loophole. He followed the letter of the law. It was legal. It was outlawed. It was not outlawed or anything. It was just politically killed. Like they reduced the boost down. And that would sort of be a trend when kart would go into its later eras, because the engines, even though they made 900 horsepower, by 2001 standards, because IndyCar only made sure the cars made 750 when they were with the XB with the XB. So in the XD, I think the XD made about 50 horsepower less or something like that, because they, Tony George didn't want the speeds running out of control, even though Ari Luyendyk would set the record at 236 on the second day qualifier, because qualifying, even though his attempt was done. I think all of the teams have qualified and done their lap times and stuff like that. So yeah, the turbo has been around. It's kind of been around. Now it's been in other forms of motorsport, but Indy is where it's at. Now, if you want to talk about people that were insane about turbochargers, don't look at IndyCar. Don't look at we'll look at Can-Am and IndyCar. Well, we'll look at Can-Am and Formula One next. So, and sports car racing. So Can-Am sports cars and Formula One. Now, I'm going to start with sports cars, because sports cars are my favorite. I cannot talk about it. The Nürburgring 24 hour is on right now. I think there's a BMW leading, I believe. And I believe there's a couple of Mercedes and everything. I think Mercedes is just going to... it's either going to be Mercedes, BMW, or maybe Porsche's going to sneak up in there. Currently watching on YouTube on the tube, on the TV. So sports cars, turbocharging has been around. Well, supercharging has actually been around longer than that. Supercharging has been around since the plane era, and since planes have been around, because prop jobs, because the prop jobs, as we call them, have need combustion, and those radial engines need something to push them along to make the insane amount of power they need to fly. So, and if you guys watch my flying footage, you guys will know I had a JN45 Curtis Jenny on the channel. I was flying it a little bit, doing some loop-the-loops in it and then crashing it because I was trying to be funny. But supercharging is not new. Supercharging has been around since the start of the automobile. So I think it started in the 20s. No, I think it's been around since the early days of the. I think it's been around since the 20s and 30s. Bentley started it. I know Duesenberg was big in the 20s with it. I know Pierce Arrow was big with it when they weren't making big ass engines. Cord was also one of them. Cord was also a 20s and 30s. Auburn was also good with supercharged Lycoming engines I think it was like 281 cubic inches or 285 cubic inches or something like that. So supercharging wasn't really well used until, I'm gonna say, the 50s in race cars, because I believe Alfa Romeos used to use it, because I believe Alfa Romeos would use it on the racetracks, and Alfa Romeo's definitely used the supercharger. For those of you who don't know, in pre-World Grand Prix racing, which was not Formula One, let's just get it. It was basically just sports cars. They were basically just sports cars with wild bodies. Early Grand Prix racing was practically sports car racing, almost in a way, because back in the 50s, they actually used to have sports car bodies they put sports car bodies on places like Monza and Spa and Rem, place where they wanted to go 200 miles an hour, where they wanted to go 150, 160 miles an hour back then. But sports cars, supercharging and turbocharging were kind of early. I don't think turbocharging would kind of get its. There would be supercharged alphas. I know that they would use that in drag racing cars, and I think prominently, I don't think turbocharging really didn't start making its way into cars till, I'm gonna say, like the late 60s, early 70s, when and I don't think sports car racing would kind of hit that turbo period until 1974, and then Formula One would follow 1977, 1979 with the ARS23, the teapot, the teapot Renault. So that was that one, and then stuff like that. Turbocharging would help. Turbocharging at Le Mans, turbocharging at Le Mans, and turbocharging at Le Mans and sports car racing would end up doubling the speeds. Now, the fastest speed on the Mulsanne straight with a non-turbocharged engine was 239 with the Porsche 917 LH from 1971. The fastest turbocharged car would be 253 miles an hour, and that would be the Roger Dorchi PWM RP88 with a Renault 2.6 liter Citroen engine, probably producing somewhere around probably over 1,000, probably over 900 horsepower, I'm going to probably say. And it catapulted it to a top speed of 253 miles an hour. They officially put the record at 405, but it was really 407. And then what happened? And then, just like at Indy, the Mulsanne chicanes got put in on the Mulsanne straight, and the car slowed down. And it would take up until like 2020 for them to do like 2018, yeah, it would take them, I think, till like 2017, 2018 to reach 217, 218 on the straightaway consistently. I mean, I think the Audis, would hit 220, but I'm not sure. Would hit 217, 218, 218, maybe 220 on the Mulsanne straight. Even though the lap times have been down to aerodynamic grip and stuff like that, which I'll get into another story. F1 sports car, F1 turbocharging. Turbocharging really didn't start until like the late 70s, and you guys want to talk about insane turbos. So back in the 80s, back in the mid to late 80s, when Ayrton Senna was with Lotus, was with Lotus Renault, those cars used to make 1,100 horsepower. So the trick was, they'd have a gearbox. They would have two sets of gearboxes, two sets of tires, and two sets of turbochargers. The first set was for the race. The second set was for qualifying, and the qualifying was the one that Senna used to go out. Senna and Mansell used to go out and do their lap time to get pole. Then the gearbox would be quick, ultra reliable, small. It'd be lightweight enough for him to shift the gears, and the transmission would break after 4 laps. Then the turbo, one would be geared to do the full distance, 900 horsepower, and then the other one would give him 1,200, because they'd have different impower on it, different intake, and they'd use different this and different that. They couldn't use different fuel. They couldn't cheat. Even to keep the weight limit, because I don't think they were allowed to refuel back then. I think they had to keep the same fuel load. I think what's his face? I think, and I think for some odd reason, I think they put shotgun. I think Williams put shotgun shells into their. Williams put shotgun shot into the pellet shot into their to their water tanks. And they found it on the track, and they were instantly banned and written off from the championship. I think it was like 1980 something. But back to just give the Cosworth 5 more years. But yeah, they were genuinely built to be the world's fastest hand grenades, basically. And they blow up, and when you saw a pipe of white smoke, that was it. You were done. You had to go into the pits. All those 7 would go in after 4 laps anyway. And sports cars had it, and then turbochargers for Formula One. Rally was Group B. Rally had Group B. Rally had Group B. Rally had Group B. The cars had 500-600 horsepower. I think at the tip of it all, the S1 Quattro ended up having like 570, 580 horsepower. Cars were amazingly fast. Cars were blindingly fast. Unfortunately, the cars were starting to become too fast and too physical for the drivers. So they ended up having, and plus the rallies were longer back then, and they ended up, I think, Hunter Toivonen ended up, Toivonen ended his death in the I forget if it was the Cyprus Rally or the Acropolis Rally or the Corsica Rally, one of those ones. He ended up his Lancia ended up catching fire. I think they took away one of the skid pads to make the car lighter, and it ruptured the fuel tank and it blew up because the turbocharger was red hot. And after that, they think they went to Group A with about 350 horsepower just to make sure the cars didn't explode upon impact, even though the Lancia was built like a Pinto in the back, But yeah, the turbocharger definitely has had its thing. American cars really don't need that because they like displacement. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, turbocharging has sort of become a thing, I guess, because the Z06, because we've had a couple of Z06s that are turbocharged. The new Zora is going to be turbocharged, and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. It's going to be interesting to hear the world's most expensive dentist drill. If you guys haven't heard of Z06 yet, I highly recommend it. I haven't heard one yet, but I've heard it on the internet. So, but yeah, guys, I wanted just to give you guys a little history on the turbo, and I thought I was going to post this about 7-8 o'clock, but it's really 9:30. But I told you guys I'd give you guys an episode. And this is my 3rd episode in a row, which is good, or not my 3rd episode in a row, but you guys know I'm close. It's my 2nd episode in a row, and I'm going to shoot one tomorrow. Because I'm going to give you Nürburgring and qualifying for the Indianapolis highlights. And I'll tell you guys how Breath of the Wild, not Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is. Tears of the Kingdom is such a sick game. If you guys could find a way to buy that game for less than $65, I highly implore it. It's a good game. Really, really, really good. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna go watch more of the Nürburgring 24. I will give you guys an update on I may give you guys all the updates on the Indy qualifying and stuff like that. I may even watch when they're going for the pole run, maybe. Let you guys watch when they're going for the pole run, watch along and stuff like that. So I hope ABC or NBC doesn't copyright me. I'm sorry, ABC, NBC. I don't mean to your footage. I'll get 2 seconds of footage. So, and I'm going to post that Corvette video behind this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. It's like 48 seconds. So it's just me shooting. It's going to be Actually, it's going to be like maybe a minute probably, because it's not much of me just doing it. I was going to watch the guy take off with his Corvette, but I didn't. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to let you guys know that that's the history of the turbocharger, and I hope you guys do it, and I hope somebody breaks Ari Leyendijk's lap record tomorrow or gets close to it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, and I'll give you guys any updates, and I may watch the last of qualifying for the pole time if I know that there's going to be one, because I'm definitely going to watch the Fast Six. The Fast Six is where they're going to do the pole time. So we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys later. Peace.